In a stunning revelation that has sent shockwaves through West Africa and beyond, Burkina Faso's interim president Captain Ibrahim Traore has publicly accused former U.S. President Donald Trump of orchestrating a covert plan to establish a U.S. military base in Nigeria's far northern region. According to Traore, this move is not merely a strategic foothold in Africa's Sahel but a deliberate step toward facilitating a joint invasion by Nigerian forces, ECOWAS troops, and potentially U.S. advisors to oust him from power. Sources close to the Burkinabe military, speaking on condition of anonymity due to the sensitivity of the matter, claim that Traore's intelligence apparatus intercepted communications and documents outlining the scheme. The alleged discovery came during a routine briefing on regional security threats, where analysts pieced together a web of diplomatic maneuvers, back-channel lobbying, and military logistics that point to a coordinated effort to destabilize Burkina Faso's post-coup government. At the heart of the accusations is Trump's reported hell-bent determination to revive U.S. influence in Africa, particularly in countering jihadist insurgencies in the Sahel. But Traore insists this is a smokescreen. The Americans, under Trump's shadow, are not here to fight terrorists. They are here to fight African sovereignty, Traore reportedly declared in a fiery address to his elite Republican Guard units late last night. He painted a picture of the proposed base in northern Nigeria, near the borders with Niger, Chad, and Cameroon, as a staging ground for rapid deployment. This location, he argued, would allow seamless integration with Nigerian army units and ECOWAS's ECOMOG forces, enabling a pincer movement against Burkina Faso from the north and west. Delving deeper into the claims, Traore linked this plot directly to Nigerian President Bola Tinubu's aggressive lobbying within ECOWAS. Since the wave of military coups swept through Mali, Guinea, Niger, and Burkina Faso between 2020 and 2023, Tinubu has positioned himself as the bloc's hawk on restoring constitutional order. Insiders reveal that Tinubu has held multiple closed-door sessions with ECOWAS heads of state, pushing for a revitalized ECOMOG, the Economic Community of West African States Monitoring Group, to intervene militarily in coup-affected nations. Tinubu's vision is clear: reinstall civilian governments that bend to Western whims. A Burkinabe official told reporters, echoing Traore's sentiments. These so-called democracies are puppets, ensuring French and American interests in uranium, gold, and oil flow uninterrupted. Traore's speech, delivered under the dim lights of a fortified barracks in Ouagadougou, was laced with urgency. He described intercepted memos allegedly showing Tinubu's envoys courting U.S. officials in Washington, offering concessions like expanded oil drilling rights in the Niger Delta in exchange for military hardware and intelligence support. Trump's base in northern Nigeria isn't for defense, it's for offense, Traore thundered, his voice rising as soldiers nodded in grim agreement. They plan to cross our borders under the guise of anti-terror operations, remove leaders like me who dare say no to neocolonialism, and install regimes that sell Africa's soul for scraps. The allegations gain traction when viewed against recent developments. Trump's post-2024 election rhetoric has emphasized America first in Africa, criticizing Biden-era policies as weak and vowing to secure U.S. interests against Chinese and Russian encroachment. Meanwhile, ECOWAS has ramped up sanctions and threats against coup-led governments, with ECOMOG drills in Ghana and Senegal simulating rapid interventions. In Nigeria, whispers of U.S. drone surveillance over Borno State, part of the far north, have fueled local suspicions, with community leaders reporting increased American advisory presence at military installations. Traore didn't stop at accusations. He urged his forces, and by extension, all Africans, to awaken to the broader threat. Be smart, be unbiased, he implored. This is not just about Burkina Faso. It's about liberating Africa from chains forged in Washington, Paris, and Abuja. Every soldier, every citizen must stand vigilant. The West fears a united Africa, free from their puppets. We must work tirelessly for that full liberation, or risk eternal subjugation. As tensions escalate, regional analysts warn of a potential flashpoint. ECOWAS has scheduled an emergency summit in Abuja next week, where Tinubu is expected to table proposals for enhanced regional security cooperation, code, critics say, for interventionist mandates. U.S. State Department officials have dismissed the claims as baseless propaganda, but Trump's allies in Congress have remained conspicuously silent, adding fuel to the fire. With intelligence reports suggesting unusual troop movements along Nigeria's northern frontier and encrypted chatter between ECOWAS commanders, The situation demands immediate scrutiny. Is this the prelude to a new era of proxy wars in West Africa, or a desperate bid by Traoré to rally support amid domestic pressures? The answers may unfold in the coming days, but one thing is certain. The Sahel is on the brink, and the stakes for African independence have never been higher. As the dust settles from Captain Ibrahim Traoré's bombshell address to his troops, new layers of the alleged conspiracy are emerging, painting a picture of U.S. former President Donald Trump's purported advocacy for Nigerian Christians as a calculated smokescreen for deeper geopolitical ambitions. Insiders within Burkina Faso's intelligence circles, bolstered by cross-referenced regional reports, claim Trump's repeated warnings about Christian genocide in Nigeria are not altruistic but a pretext to justify embedding U.S. military assets in the country's volatile north. Assets that would double as eyes and ears on the Alliance of Sahel States, AES. The burgeoning anti-Western bloc comprising Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. Traoré, in his impassioned speech that has now leaked to regional media outlets, didn't mince words. Trump's tears for Nigerian Christians are crocodile tears, shed to mask his true intent, to plant a military base in the heart of our neighbors' territory, from where they can spy on AES movements, track our defenses, and strike when we least expect. The Burkinabe leader, drawing from what he described as irrefutable dossiers compiled by AES joint intelligence units, alleged that this base would be positioned in Nigeria's far northern states like Borno or Kano, areas plagued by Boko Haram and ISIS West Africa insurgencies, but strategically adjacent to Niger's southern border. From there, U.S. drones, satellite uplinks, and special forces could monitor AES military drills, supply lines, and even civilian mobilizations, feeding real-time data back to Washington and Abuja for a timed incursion. Delving into the origins of this narrative, Trump's rhetoric on Nigerian Christians dates back to his post-election surge in late 2024, escalating through 2025 with statements labeling the violence as an existential threat to Christianity. He has repeatedly threatened U.S. strikes if the killings persist, framing it as a battle against radical Islamic terrorists responsible for mass slaughter. Experts and locals in Nigeria, however, have long argued the reality is more nuanced. Violence in the region affects all communities, driven by ethnic, resource, and climatic factors rather than purely religious persecution. Traoré's camp seizes on this discrepancy, asserting that Trump's inflammatory language, echoed in White House briefings and State Department releases, serves to rally domestic U.S. support for intervention while providing diplomatic cover for military expansion in Africa. Sources familiar with U.S.-Nigeria talks reveal that discussions about a potential American base have intensified under Trump's influence, with proposals floating for a joint U.S.-Nigeria Army base in the north to enhance intelligence, drone surveillance, and rapid response missions. While official U.S. statements deny any firm plans, whispers from retired Nigerian military figures and U.S. AFRICOM briefings suggest otherwise, including options for supporting Nigerian forces against insurgents as a gateway to permanent presence. Traoré connects these dots to a broader strategy. The base would not only combat terrorism but serve as a forward operating post to monitor AES operatives, tracking everything from troop rotations in Mali's Kidal region to Burkina Faso's gold mine security details, resources Traoré has accused the U.S. of coveting. The AES, formed in 2024 as a defiant response to ECOWAS sanctions and Western meddling, represents the ultimate thorn in this alleged plot. Comprising 3 junta-led nations that withdrew from ECOWAS amid accusations of the bloc being a puppet of France and the U.S., the alliance has rapidly evolved into a sovereign powerhouse with its own joint military force, regional passport, and economic initiatives. Traoré, a vocal critic of ECOWAS's institutional failures and pro-Western bias, has repeatedly accused the organization of plotting invasions under the guise of restoring democracy. In his address, he debunked Trump's Christian advocacy as a Trojan horse, claiming intercepted communications show U.S. envoys coordinating with Nigerian President Bola Tinubu to use ECOMOG as the invasion's vanguard, with American logistics providing the muscle. Armed with this intelligence, Traoré has escalated Burkina Faso's defenses to unprecedented levels. Reports from the front lines indicate a massive mobilization. AES joint forces conducting round-the-clock patrols along the Niger-Burkina border, stockpiling Russian-supplied anti-aircraft systems and drones, and training civilian militias in asymmetric warfare tactics. "We are armed to the teeth," Traoré proclaimed, ready for any ECOWAS thrust through Nigeria, bankrolled by American dollars. He detailed alleged U.S.-sponsored maneuvers, including increased AFRICOM flights over the Sahel and covert arms shipments to Nigerian units near the frontier, framing it as a direct threat to AES sovereignty. This revelation has ignited a firestorm across West Africa. In Nigeria, opposition figures are demanding transparency on any base deals, while ECOWAS officials scramble to convene, with Tinubu's office issuing vague denials of aggressive intent. Meanwhile, AES diplomats are reportedly reaching out to Russian and Chinese counterparts for enhanced support, signaling a potential realignment that could fracture the region further. As satellite imagery purportedly shows unusual activity at Nigerian airfields and Burkinabe forces dig in, the question looms: how far will this brinkmanship go before the Sahel erupts? In the wake of his explosive revelations about a purported Nigeria-ECOWAS invasion plot, Burkina Faso's President Captain Ibrahim Traore has intensified his message of defiance, urging Africans to break free from the chains of Western puppetry that he claims stifles the continent's growth and self-actualization. Speaking in a follow-up rally to thousands of supporters and military personnel gathered in Ouagadougou's Central Square, Traoré framed the alleged conspiracy as part of a broader neo-colonial agenda, where Western powers, led by figures like former U.S. President Donald Trump, exploit Africa's resources while propping up compliant leaders to maintain control. Traoré's words carried an unmistakable urgency, echoing his long-standing criticisms of Western hypocrisy and double standards. The Western world has no good intentions for Africa's growth or self-actualization, he declared, his voice booming over loudspeakers as the crowd waved AES flags. They label us terrorists today and heroes tomorrow, all while plundering our gold, uranium, and dignity. They install puppet regimes that dance to their tune, distracting us with empty promises of aid while our people starve and our economies bleed. Drawing from historical grievances, Traoré referenced how Western nations have allegedly undermined local industries to protect their interests, urging Burkinabe citizens to distrust Western media narratives that paint African leaders like him as unstable. He pointed to Burkina Faso's recent moves, nationalizing gold mines and expelling French troops, as models for true sovereignty, arguing that such actions resonate across the continent where many question lingering ties to former colonizers. Delving deeper, Traoré tied this rhetoric directly to the Alliance of Sahel States, AES, portraying it as a bulwark against Western meddling. Formed in 2024 amid coups in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, the AES has evolved from a defense pact into a confederation emphasizing collective security and economic independence, severing ties with ECOWAS and rejecting Western military presence. We are not in a democracy imposed by the West. We are in a revolution for Africa's soul, Traoré asserted, invoking his earlier declarations that Burkina Faso's path is revolutionary, not beholden to foreign models. He accused ECOWAS of being a tool for Western interests, citing the bloc sanctions and threats of intervention as evidence of puppetry. Recent AES actions, including cutting military relations with Western powers and turning to Russian support, underscore this shift, with Traoré warning that continued subservience will doom Africa to perpetual exploitation. They fear a united AES because it exposes their empire of slaves, he said, referencing perceptions of developing nations as mere resource providers. Turning his fire squarely on Nigerian President Bola Tinubu, Traoré delivered a scathing personal indictment, accusing him of embodying the very puppetry he decries. Tinubu, you have been a selfish Nigerian president, Traoré stated bluntly, his remarks drawing cheers from the crowd and rapid shares on social media platforms like X, where users in Nigeria and beyond amplified the critique. He lambasted Tinubu for prioritizing regaining political powers within ECOWAS over addressing Nigeria's crumbling economy, which critics say is dying under his watch. Pointing to soaring inflation, persistent insecurity, and massive external borrowing, including a proposed $24 billion in foreign loans, Traoré argued that Tinubu's reforms, while touted as bold, have inflicted bitter medicine on ordinary Nigerians without delivering relief. Your profile is not good. The economy is dying under your watch, he continued, echoing domestic opposition from parties like the PDP, which have slammed Tinubu's budgets as masking hardship and signaling fiscal drift. Economists have warned of violations in running overlapping budgets for 2024, 2025, and 2026, exacerbating debt and inequality. Traoré urged Tinubu to focus more on making your country great, rather than lobbying for ECOMOG interventions to reinstall civil rule in coup-hit nations, which he claims serves only to perpetuate Western dominance. In a pointed call to action, Traoré demanded Tinubu sit up or step down to let a capable young Nigerian take over, invoking the spirit of youth-led revolutions across the Sahel. This resonates amid growing Nigerian discontent, with ex-users like @Munachiv3481, a vocal critic from Port Harcourt, labeling Tinubu a fraud and highlighting issues like power outages and economic mismanagement in posts that have gained traction. Analysts note that Tinubu's midterm boasts of narrow deficits and growth mask realities like high consumer prices and polarization, fueling calls for generational change. As AES forces remain on high alert, bolstered by Russian arms and joint patrols, Traoré's rally has amplified regional tensions, with ECOWAS's emergency summit looming and reports of U.S. military deliberations on Nigerian bases adding to the volatility. Trump's threats of strikes to protect Nigerian Christians further complicate the narrative, seen by Traoré as a pretext for intervention. With social media buzzing and borders fortified, the Sahel teeters on the edge of confrontation, raising alarms about a potential proxy war that could engulf West Africa. Culminating a day of escalating revelations and fiery oratory, Burkina Faso's President Captain Ibrahim Traore turned his gaze squarely on former U.S. President Donald Trump in a climactic segment of his rally speech, delivering a stark philosophical rebuke to what he described as America's arrogant imperialism. Framing the alleged U.S.-backed plot for a Nigerian military base as the latest chapter in a long history of Western aggression, Traoré warned Trump that sheer military might, however formidable, pales against the unyielding resolve of soldiers and peoples fighting for their very survival and total freedom. As you sit in your towers, Trump, thinking you have weapons to wage war on any country you choose, forget that there's a profound difference between having weapons and soldiers fighting for survival, fighting for total freedom. The yardstick is very different, Traoré proclaimed, his words met with thunderous applause from the assembled crowd, including AES delegates from Mali and Niger. Delving into this distinction, Traoré drew on Burkina Faso's own turbulent history of coups and insurgencies, arguing that conventional armies equipped with drones, airstrikes, and bases often falter against asymmetrical forces driven by existential stakes. Your soldiers fight for orders, for paychecks, for empires built on exploitation, he elaborated, referencing how Western interventions in Africa, from Libya to Somalia, have bred resentment and prolonged chaos rather than stability. In contrast, Traoré asserted, AES fighters are motivated by a revolutionary fire for self-determination, echoing his earlier speeches where he denounced terrorism as a tool of imperialism to keep Africa in perpetual conflict and resource dependency. We fight not for conquest, but for our children's future, free from your chains. That yardstick measures not in missiles, but in unbreakable will, he added, invoking the spirit of anti-colonial icons like Thomas Sankara, Burkina Faso's assassinated revolutionary leader whose legacy Traoré often channels. Traoré's critique extended to Trump's repeated threats of military action in Nigeria, which he dismissed as hypocritical posturing under the guise of protecting Christians. Stop brutalizing any country you think you can, Traoré demanded, accusing Trump of using religious persecution claims, such as designating Nigeria country of particular concern, to justify potential interventions that serve U.S. strategic interests, like countering Chinese influence or securing oil routes. He pointed to reports of U.S. military planning for escalatory options in Nigeria, including airstrikes and ground deployments, as evidence of this aggression, warning that such moves would only unite Africans against a common foe. Power is transient, Trump. You're now a person of particular concern yourself, Traoré quipped, flipping the U.S. designation back on its issuer and alluding to shifting global dynamics where emerging powers like Russia and China offer alternatives to Western dominance. He delved into the impermanence of empires, citing historical falls from Rome to colonial Britain, and cautioned that America's annihilation rhetoric, boasted in speeches about hitting terrorists very hard, risks backfiring in a multipolar world where African nations are increasingly rejecting foreign bases and interventions. This direct address to Trump amplified Traoré's broader call for African liberation, resonating with voices across the continent, including Nigerian critics like @Munachiv3481 from Port Harcourt, who has publicly lambasted President Tinubu as a fraud amid economic woes and power outages, echoing Traoré's accusations of selfish leadership. As the rally dispersed under a starry Sahel sky, with AES forces visibly reinforced and intelligence chatter hinting at imminent ECOWAS maneuvers, the region stands at a crossroads. Traoré's warnings may either galvanize a Pan-African resistance or provoke the very confrontation he decries, but for now the message is clear. Africa's fight for sovereignty is far from over, and the West's grip may be slipping faster than anticipated.